What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the 2022 Week 1 edition of the Pro Football Focus Fantasy Show here on RotoGrinders. I am Brit Devine, back for another year with Mr. Ian Hartitz from Pro Football Focus. Ian, it is a great day to be great, dude. What is going on?
You are damn right, Britt. Week 1, got our beaks wet last night with that pretty entertaining, dominant Bills victory, but ready to talk some main slate, man. I don't have a DFS show this year on the PFF Fantasy Pod. Still grinding all of it, honestly. So I'm just excited we have this platform, Britt. Let's get the people some winners.
Yeah, I've listened to everything on the PFF pod so far this week, and don't downplay yourself, Ian. It's still a very nice show. Dwayne may not be there, but it is still an excellent podcast.
I appreciate you, man.
So this year, right? So this year we're going to do things a little bit. It's sort of the same, but a little different. With the way sports betting and prop betting is going, I've done the prop show with Chief with the Prop Shop show. I did that on Tuesday night. That's on the YouTube feed, on the podcast feed, all of that. With just how big all that's become, we're going to focus just a little bit more on that and maybe cut the DFS talk down just a smidge. There's a bajillion DFS shows. We're still going to talk cash game and tournament plays. But for the season, we're just going to try to talk a couple more props. You can relate that to DFS if you want to. We're going to have a couple of lines, over under, spread picks, whatever you want like that. Ian, I'm already going to disagree with you on one of these for sure. You might be able to guess which one, but we'll see what we're talking about a little bit later. But just a little bit more sports betting. It's become more prevalent. It's all over RotoGrinders. There's a million different ways to get involved in sports nowadays. So we figured we would just lean into that a little bit more. But that is not going to stop us from going with the Mismatch Manifesto. You have it up. It is not free on Pro Football Focus this year. It is a premium content article. So the only way to actually get a look at this for free or, to get insight into it is through this pod if you wanted to take a look at it. So, Ian, what you did is it looks like you've got some information from last year, which doesn't always directly correlate, but we're going to look at some of last year's data, and I'm going to grill you. How does that transition into some of the teams we're looking at this week for week 1 in terms of it was DFS or sports betting? What can we take out of it? What are a couple of your major, ideas or leans you had as you were putting this together off the top?
Yeah, I mean, it is just by the nature of the article. As we continue to get more information for this year, we'll be better off. But if you just want to go ahead and scroll down to our explosive plays section, I mean, pretty clearly what pops out is this 49ers passing game, the most explosive passing offense last year, just in terms of 20-plus yard completions per dropbacks. And I know that was with Jimmy G under center, not Trey Lance. But you look at this Bears defense, man, losing, there's the complete alpha and Khalil Mack. And we'll keep an eye on that weather. The wind looks okay. It is going to be rainy. But with Trey Lance, man, we'll talk about our cash and tourney plays, but I really think he is viable in both at this point. It could be a situation where, okay, maybe Lance isn't the most polished real life passer, but we don't really care about style points in fantasy football. I don't think he's going to have to be asked to do all that much in order just to get the ball in Debo and Ayuk's hands. We'll see about George Kittle's status, but I'm riding with Trey Lance as a top 7 QB out of the gate, man. I don't need to see it first. I'm confident that he's got the sort of dual threat profile that, again, we've seen guys like Jalen Hurts, like early career Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson utilize to great success in fantasy. I mean, come on, man. Like how many times we played Taysom Hill over the last 2 years? You tell me we can't get a couple big time performances from Trey Lance?
Yeah, and it's the explosive play rate might even go up because Jimmy G was getting those from Debo, on the catch and run. Now you're still going to get those with Debo and Ayuk getting some downfield targets from Trey Lance. So I think that might even go up this year. Just an absolute great matchup. You mentioned Kittle, so we're recording this, Friday afternoon. I got to think we haven't gotten official word. I don't think Kittle's going to play this week. How do you feel about that?
Nah, it doesn't look good. I'm more or less anticipating him not being out there. But Lance is one of those quarterbacks that, you actually don't need to necessarily stack him just to have him out there. So if you want to go, with the naked look, I am obviously okay with that. So Trey Lance is good. Also, with these looking at the run side of things, you notice that the Indianapolis Colts are set up awfully well against the Texans, which is common sense. I get it. Nice to see it in the graph, though. And man, Britt, okay, in cash, McCaffrey at 8,500, wherever he's out in DraftKings, it is tough to get away. But this could be a week where we have, Jonathan Taylor against the Texans and Derrick Henry against the Giants, where if McCaffrey wasn't here, we'd be all over these matchups. I do wonder if we're going to see that ownership not be quite as high as normal just because of how obvious chalk McCaffrey's going to be.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about that a little bit more. I think this is the first week one, or even week in general in DFS that I can remember. There is no stone cold chalk this week, Ian. There is nothing. We had no injuries. The sites priced people, I think, reasonably appropriately.
Pittman, maybe that's it.
Pittman's like the one on DraftKings, but I think it's wide open this week in tournaments. There's, maybe Pittman will squeak like 20% ish on DraftKings, but I think it's going to be pretty spread out. You can't, if you're trying to get JT and Henry and McCaffrey into like you're playing a bunch of wide receiver threes and things like that on teams. The sites did a good job. Mainly, I think it had to do, we didn't have that preseason injury, but this is a very, very wide open DFS week for me. And all those explosive runs, I'm pretty sure they came against Houston last year for Jonathan Taylor too, right?
Pretty much, man. He went absolutely off against them. But scroll down a little bit more, past pace even. We'll go ahead and look straight at pressure, because there are a handful of quarterbacks that should really have clean pockets to work with. I mean, the Jameis Winston and New Orleans Saints offense is something I'm really intrigued in. Like, just, I get it. AJ Terrell, Falcons #1 corner. He's an absolute stud, and he was an absolute stud last year. And that didn't stop the Falcons from really being a terrible defense against quarterbacks and wide receivers alike. Having the league's worst pass rush, was a big reason why. But last year, Jameis, even though they weren't really passing the ball all that much in the first 6-7 weeks, which I get, Marquez Callaway was your #1 wide receiver during that stretch, we still saw Jameis flirt with like some legit boom outcomes. Week 1 against the Packers, he threw 5 touchdowns. And he had another big game before getting injured as well. So Jameis with maybe Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry, throw Michael Thomas in there if he's going to be healthy enough to suit up. I like attacking that New Orleans Saints passing game this week in the Dome. I know there's not a ton of wind going on, throughout the league, but there is enough precipitation in places like, Chicago and Cincinnati that I don't hate, getting around some of these offenses that we just know we don't have to worry about at all. Same thing goes with Jalen Hurts and the Eagles offense, against the Lions. So as much as the Lions are getting the Hard Knocks bump and everything, I still think, Hurts, AJ Brown, even Miles Sanders, who we'll talk about a little bit later, a lot of upside there. And finally, just, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, 2 more quarterbacks that really should have all day to throw. Credit to the Jets for sprucing up their front 7 a little bit. Arizona, not so much, man. I mean, JJ Watt now being at risk of missing the game, in addition to losing Chandler Jones in the offseason. I mean, we could be seeing, a y'all must have forgot type of week 1 performance out of Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, that Chiefs Cardinals game stack is going to be pretty trendy. Britt, do you think like Marquise Brown, if we get Rondale ruled out, could be someone that just becomes the chalk? Because like, who else is Kyler going to throw the ball to? Ertz could be out too. I think he did practice today, but
yeah, Ertz made it. I would have to imagine, right? So I've been following the Rondale more because you're going to see in some of the props I talk about. I've got some prize picks plays, and I know you've got some from the sports book, but I don't think you get a hamstring injury on a Thursday. You don't practice Friday. They say it's 50-50. I don't know. I'd say he's got like a 10 to 15% chance of playing. I'd pretty much close to 0, honestly, in my opinion, but you never know. I don't think Rondale Moore is going to end up playing. We could see him out there, and the play I'm going to have in just a little bit might be a little weaker. I still think it's good anyway. But yeah, it's wide open. Who's the new slot guy? I forgot his name off the top of my head.
Isabella?
No, I don't. They hate Andy Isabella.
I know they do.
Dortch is coming.
Oh my
Dortch
gosh.
at 3K.
We're gonna play Greg Dortch over Andy Isabella.
I don't think so. You do need some value out there today, but it's interesting. But yeah, Hollywood Brown, the connection with Kyler Murray.
I mean, he was already
DeAndre Hopkins. What else are they gonna do?
That's the thing, man. Like, even if Rondale was healthy, I think Hollywood would have been an absolutely fine play. And now at this point, like he's getting to like CeeDee Lamb territory where it's just like there's nobody else in the offense to even throw the ball to. But a few more things here on the pressure. As you can see, Tua and Kirk Cousins could be having a rough afternoon. I'm curious how much Mike McDaniel can improve that Dolphins offensive line, because last year the Dolphins literally were the best offense. The worst offense in the league in pressure rate and the best defense in the league at getting after opposing quarterbacks. So keep an eye on that. And then with the Vikings, Kirk Cousins, man, last year's second most impacted quarterback in terms of the yards per attempt drop off, working in a clean pocket versus when being pressured. So as much as, we just focus kind of on the Aaron Rodgers drama, this and that throughout the offseason, that Packers defense is no joke. And even if Jair is not going to necessarily shadow anyone, could be a long afternoon for that Vikings passing game. Want to scroll down to the yards before contact, a few more notes before we get to some bets here. Really top matchups at the line of scrimmage this week, highlighted by Baltimore. You see teams with, mobile quarterbacks a lot of times popping here, and for good reason. They make their run games more efficient. But Baltimore, if J.K. Dobbins isn't going to play, which sure doesn't sound good, it's gross, man. But Mike Davis at 4.4K is the cheapest running back that you could realistically expect 15 plus touches from. Also got Derrick Henry and the Titans. We talked about him a little bit before. Maybe the answer in Arizona is James Conner, because who else are they going to give the ball to? He's set up reasonably well. And yeah, I mentioned before, but Miles Sanders in Philly, man. I just feel like a lot of the problems we had with Miles Sanders throughout the summer really are now non-issues in week one. We wondered if Jordan Howard was going to come back. He didn't. We wondered if Miles Sanders was healthy. He's good now. He's already said he's going to play and everything. And now we're looking at the Eagles favored in a dome, where I would not be surprised at all, Britt, if we look at the box score afterwards and Miles Sanders has 20 plus combined carries and targets. So love getting the Sanders this week, especially with guys, Antonio Gibson, Najee Harris, and Saquon Barkley, especially. I think taking more of that ownership in that 5K range.
All right. Anything else from your article you want to talk about? The EPA per play doesn't really correlate too well to, season over season. Yeah. It sounds like that's about it for the Mismatch Manifesto. If you guys wanted to read this or any of the other great articles over at Pro Football Focus, make sure to go check that out. Just a plethora of information, grades, stats, a bajillion tools, sports betting, ownerships. I know we have our own things like that at RotoGrinders. But for another source, it's not very expensive either to get a second look at that sort of thing. All right. With the Mismatch Manifesto out of the way, I want to remind you guys, all the stuff we have going on here at RotoGrinders. We're jam-packed with content this season. Single entry, showdown, everything in between, sports betting. You want up to lineup lock. You want to talk single entry. I saw that was on the podcast with Squirrel. There's just a bajillion different ways to get information from all of the shows and podcasts here at RotoGrinders. You can follow us on the RotoGrinders YouTube page and on the Daily Fantasy Football podcast feed, wherever you subscribe to your podcast. And while you're at it, go check out the PFF pod with my man Ian as well. All right, high five, Ian. Boom. All right, we'll get that one out of the way. All right, let's get into some of our bets this week. We're going to talk. I've got two spreads I'm betting. It looks like you've got a parlay and a spread as well. And then we'll talk about some of our props. I'm going to go first because you've mentioned the Eagles in a dome. And I think Jalen Hurts is going to be pretty chalky in DFS. I know you like A.J. Brown. Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith are tournament stars. You like Miles Sanders. Well, Eagles -4. I mean, this looks like an absolute smash play to me. I know it's on the road. You got to like road favorites this week because that's pretty much all you got across the board. And this is just a total, except for maybe the Lions' offensive line. The Eagles have a great defensive line, by the way. It's just a complete and utter mismatch of talent across the board in the Eagles' favor, in my opinion. I just think the Eagles they're going to get out. They've got a more aggressive coaching system. They're definitely going to throw the ball with Jalen Hurts this year. Is Jalen Hurts our guy? Is he not? They brought in A.J. Brown. They're going for it in the passing game. So we're going to have a more efficient offense away from all that running stuff they did last year because they actually have the talent and I think the drive to throw the ball down the field. 4 points. This is an easy cover for me, in my opinion. With everyone liking them in DFS, I just think 4 is a little too light. So the Eagles are definitely they're my favorite spread pick. I know DraftKings has this great promo. We're not affiliated. We have no show sponsor. They had that great promo, right? If any team gets up by 10 or more on any of the money lines, I know it's the spread. They just pay you out. So I did it with 7 points on the Bills. So that I won my money line bet within like five minutes on Thursday night. But you can get those if you're looking for the money line. The DraftKings specifically this week is a really great way to get that. If any team gets up by 10 and you place a money line bet on it, you automatically win the bet. So check that out with the Eagles. I think that's one of my favorite plays this week. You got to like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I'm already talking up every player in the matchup. Hard not to. It is one of those things, man, where I feel like a fish here picking a bunch of these road favorites. But to your point, like it seems like every single matchup we're basically looking at that. Or we have, just a home situation where it's like Tua versus Belichick, Carson Wentz versus the Jaguars. So it's like the home favorites don't have quarterbacks we trust. And the road favorites, like we're actually having to buy almost a touchdown. So to only see the Eagles at 4, I mean, realistically, you look at that roster, I think you can argue it's a top 5 team in the NFL. Might be just, buying a little bit of the Detroit Lions hype a little too much.
Yeah, I'll take that hype from Hard Knocks, and I'll bet against that. No problem. All right, so let's go. We'll go with a parlay. I like your parlay, so I'll let you know right now what bet I'm going to talk to you against on the other one here. But I like the parlay. I actually bet this once I saw it on here. So what do you got here?
Yeah, it's not quite even odds, but you can bet 100 to win 78 on the Ravens, minus 315 over the Jets, and the Bengals, minus 285 over the Steelers. Again, like when I look at the Eagles versus the Lions, I don't think the Lions are terrible necessarily, but you could throw them in that if you wanted to. Some of these other road favorites that are bigger, like Jameis versus the Falcons, like, okay, I think we can see that blowing up. Mahomes versus Kyler, I'm giving Kyler some respect there. So going through all the matchups, like, Trey Lance against the Bears, yeah, I think the 49ers are better, but I'm not exactly hyped about, backing Trey Lance by a touchdown just to start the season. So for me, the Ravens against Joe Flacco and Joe Burrow against freaking Mitchell Trubisky, those just seem like the two biggest layups of the week to me. And I'm happy to get basically, 80 cents on the dollar for that bet. Now, the one Brit does not like is going to be me backing one home team, a motivated home team, Brit. Monday night, they've been shunned, discarded by everyone in their city. That's the Seattle Seahawks plus 6.5 at home against the Broncos. Emotional return for Russell Wilson. He's someone that, let's face it, Britt, we didn't see play his best football in 2021. Might just be a situation where the emotions involved are going to be able to lead the Seahawks to an amazing 6-point defeat that they managed to backdoor cover. Geno Smith has been okay for the last calendar year. All right. That's what I'm trying to say. He's not been a god. He's not even been good. He has been okay. And I'm still confident that there's enough firepower in the Seattle passing game to at least keep this one close. So not going to crown the Broncos just yet. I wouldn't be surprised if this sets up as the classic kind of underwhelming debut for Russ.
I don't know. I am definitely on the Broncos side of that one. I do agree with you, Geno. Is he the worst quarterback in the league? It's close, but
it opened at 4.
He's got at least he has DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and Penny showed out last year. We'll see what they can do.
It opened at 4. I'm seeing 89% of the bets are on the Broncos. It's like, come on. This just seems like the classic. We think we know way too much going into week 1.
All right, my other spread bet's going to be the Chargers minus 3.5. I wish it was 3. I don't mind buying it down to 3 just so you get the push if the Chargers end up charging. As long as they don't do that, I think this is a pretty easy win. The Chargers are clearly across the outside of like Devontae Adams and Darren Waller, right? So they're two very, very, very good at their position players, but it's not like the Chargers are lacking in offensive weapons. Total complete mismatch across the board in terms of talent. You got Herbert at Carr. That's basically worth 3 points in its own, if you ask me. The defense the Chargers are going to roll out this year is going to be absolutely crazy. They've got a great pass rush. They're going to be great basically all over the field. They've got a great coach. I'll definitely take that. Who's going to play those fourth downs correctly, specifically when you're looking at spread bets. I think the Raiders got really, really lucky to make the playoffs last year. They were minus 65 points in point differential. Just how do you end up making the playoffs when you are down in points on the season? It rarely happens.
I know, it's so cool.
I just think Devontae, I'm sure he's great, and I expect him to have a good game. And Darren Waller, he got paid, so he's feeling a lot better. I expect him to do good, but I think that Chargers defense is legitimate. It's going to be a top 5 unit on the season, and the Raiders offensive line is going to be in big, big, big trouble against what the Chargers are going to have. And it's I'll put quotations, home game for the Chargers. I don't know if that really means anything. I just think it could be a shootout. I expect them to win the shootout, and it could absolutely be a blowout, in my opinion, if that Devontae Adams connection isn't there from the start of the game on week 1. So I got the Chargers. Do you like that one?
Yeah, I liked your Eagles take too. I'd be down to throw those two money lines in a separate parlay. I might have to do that right after this show. All
right. So those are a couple of spread bets, a couple of props. Why don't you go over? You'll take your 3. You've got them on Sportsbooks. I've got a Prize Picks power pick, a 2-pick. That's really injury based, but I think I'm going to come out on the good side of the injury. So I want to get the lines out to the people a little bit earlier. I dropped them in the prop shop in our RotoGrinders Discord a little earlier in the day. But let's go. I like all your little prop bets you have here.
Amon-Ra St. Brown, the sun god himself, over 5.5 receptions. You can get it at minus 110 at DraftKings Sportsbook. Last 6 games of 2021, See ya, Brit. 10 catches, 8 catches, 8 catches, 9 catches, 8 catches, 8 catches. Just not even close. Again, the line's at 5.5. And I know Swift and Hawkinson weren't there, but Amon-Ra, he's still just being featured. And this is a situation where it's just a reception. So even if he gets shut down, I just think that we could be looking at him getting 4 to 5 screens in this game, let alone any sort of downfield stuff that comes his way. So I'm happy taking that. Looking at the Eagles defense too, I like Darius Slade, James Bradbury, but they stick to the outside. That's going to give Amon-Ra St. Brown constant matchups against Savonte Maddox. Last year, Eagles 30th in explosive pass play rate allowed to wide receivers targeted from the slot, 26 yards per attempt, 30th in QB rating allowed. So perfect mix of Amon-Ra really being the engine of this Lions offense, going up against the kind of kryptonite spot of that Eagles defense. Also love Mike Evans anytime touchdown plus 105 over once again at DraftKings Sportsbook. Here are Mike Evans' 8 games without Chris Godwin over the past 2 seasons. 104 yards, touchdown, 122 yards, touchdown, 41 yards, touchdown, 55 yards, touchdown, 47 yards, touchdown, 89 yards, 2 touchdowns, 117 yards, touchdown, 119 yards, touchdown.
Wait, so no, everyone's a touchdown?
He's got 9 touchdowns in 8 games. The guy has not missed
this right now.
Yeah, come on, man. And like Chris Godwin, I know they're calling him a game time decision, but even if he's out there, I just have a hard time believing they're really going to put a full game's worth of snaps on his plate. And oh yeah, there's no AB this year. All due respect to Russell Gage trying to replace him. He's hurt. And as much as I think Julio Jones isn't quite dust yet, we all know about Julio's, ability to score touchdowns. So you take Gronk out of this offense, it just seems like destiny to me that Mike Evans is going to find his way into the end zone. Finally, I also like Mitch Trubisky under 20.5 completions on I had a matchups edition of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast with Kevin Cole. And I asked Kevin if Trubisky's over under 2.5 starts this year. And he took the under on 2.5 quarters for Trubisky and was talking about Tom Savage, against the Jaguars back in 2017 when they drafted Watson, and all offseason long, they gave Savage the credit. And then all of a sudden get down the first half and he gets pulled. I really think that could be the case with Trubisky. And honestly, just this number, like even if he had 0 chance of getting benched, which I don't think it's 0, I think it's definitely above that. I mean, Trubisky's, hit this mark in just 26 of 52 career starts. So for me, having like basically even odds over at BetMGM minus 115 on the under at 20.5, I think he has a lot of different ways to get to that number.
All right, yeah, and there's some weather in that game too, so maybe a couple of drop receptions, all that adding up into that.
Now we're talking.
So if you want to know where the best lines are, where to check player props really quick, right? Because I hit the 105 touchdown at DraftKings. I didn't go to Scores and Odds to check it out, but I should have. I just trusted that Ian gave me the best line because I would expect him to do something like that. I did bet that, by the way. You can get access to all of that on Scores and Odds. That is our sports betting app here at RotoGrinders. If you want to check out, hey, Gabe Davis, what was his best anytime touchdown? I was like plus 160. Go to nice. Scores and Odds, boom, you get it. Yeah, I did that for sure last night. That was a nice little night sports betting I had. You can get all that if you want access to all the picks. You can get from all of the personalities here at RotoGrinders. There's a subscription for that, but just to be able to find the best line, to get your best bonuses when you sign up, check it all out over at Scores and Odds. Everything you need to be a better sports bettor. All right, let's get into DFS. We'll go position by position a little bit. We'll talk some cash. We'll talk some tournaments to wrap up the PFF fantasy show for week 1. We'll start at quarterback. I got 2 guys on my cash game radar, and I think you can apply it to both sites. I don't hate if you wanted to try for a Patrick Mahomes, but I'm on the running quarterbacks this week. I'm looking at Jalen Hurts, and I'm looking at Lamar Jackson. I've mentioned I like Philadelphia on the -4, and we all seem to like, at least on this show, the skill position players of Philadelphia. So Hurts just looks really juicy in a dome, no weather concerns against the Detroit defense, who sure it's going to be improved a little bit, but come on. I mean, this is still the Detroit Lions defense of last season. And then Lamar Jackson, who is playing for himself this entire season. He's going to ball out, especially week 1. And it's the New York Jets, Ian. This isn't too hard to put together.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Ravens offense and they talked about in the offseason wanting to get back to 2019 with what running backs at this point. I mean, I just have a hard time believing they're going to go down with Mike Davis and Kenyon Drake. Like this really should be the Lamar Jackson show from week 1 on. So I'm fine going down though to Jalen Hurts, saving that basically $500 right now. In my initial cash game build, I only have an extra $100. If I could get up to Lamar, like I would just rank him ahead of Jalen straight up, but I'm fine. I'm fine with either.
Yeah. What are you looking at in tournaments for the quarterback position? I think like I said at the beginning of the show, there's no stone cold locks. There's no team that is going to get heavy ownership. There's no player individually at any position outside of probably Michael Pittman on DraftKings that's going to be super high owned. A lot of ways to go. You can't play. I mean, you can play everybody, but you don't really want to play everybody. So we got to narrow it down a little bit.
Yeah, I'm loving Jameis Winston at only 5.3K, easy money. And you can you were talking before about, jamming CMC, Henry, and Jonathan Taylor in there. If you want to do that, look at the Saints stack because we can get Jameis for 5,300. Michael Thomas, if he plays, is only 5,700. I think he is on the route to playing. I mean, everything we've heard about him seems to signal that. Chris Olave, 4,500. I'm not sure about his early season usage, but at least seems just like a guy that can be a boom or bust player for us, which obviously we'll take in tournaments, given his field stretching ability. And even Jarvis Landry at 5,000, kind of a forgotten guy. So again, all three receivers between 4,500 and 5,700. Picked whatever two you like, stack them with Jameis, and you're going to have all sorts of money to go spend at the other spots on the roster. And also just because of that, I mean, I kind of already talked about the matchup when we were going through the mismatch stuff, but yeah, Falcons reigning league worst defense and pressure rate. So if there is going to be a little bit of a transition period for the Saints, getting on without Terron Armstead, who's now playing for the Dolphins, like this probably won't be the matchup to really exploit that. And as good as AJ Terrell is, he only shadowed Justin Jefferson all of last season. So I don't think any of these wide receivers are going to end up on Terrell Island for the entire game.
A couple I think Kyler Murray, of course, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce is very cheap on DraftKings at least, and you can mix in a couple of the other receivers over there. So, but the Kyler Murray side is interesting because their defense is not great this year, and we're down. There's just going to be, this is like a spot where you can get some, in quotations, value. If you hold your nose and want to play AJ Green. Or if I like AJ Green. I didn't even get to my props. I'll hit that up at the end of the show here. I totally forgot about my
football can be so fun. Football can be so fun, and you're choosing to talk about AJ Green right now. It's week 1, Britt. Come on.
But what I'm getting at is ways to make cheaper stacks in a high scoring game because Kyler's not ultra expensive. And Green's not, and Ertz isn't really expensive either. If you forego Hollywood Brown, who's probably going to carry a little bit of ownership, there's ways to make a little bit of a cheaper and lower owned stack to get a higher owned or a higher scoring running back or to get one of the elite wide receivers into your lineup. I don't think it's crazy. And some of the run backs on Kansas City, if you want to play a Hardman or an MVS, these guys aren't salary breakers. They're not going to kill your lineup in terms of salary. I think that game is very interesting. A lot of people will go to it, but I don't know. I'm going to be making some teams on that. And I know you like Lance from San Francisco, and I don't think Kittle's going to play. It's a narrower target tree. I mean, Deebo Samuel has gone, if you look at his career without George Kittle over 3 years, he's basically gone nuclear in almost every single game. I think it's like 6 out of 7. He has these monster lines. And that was with Jimmy Garoppolo, but Lance is still going to be able to get him the football and maybe even a little deeper down the field. You got Ayuk, who's sort of in that mid-tier on both sites in terms of salary. There's ways to use Lance and get a massive target expectation from some of his wide receivers out there. I think he looks pretty interesting. My question for you, so I know on your Mismatch Manifesto, we didn't really talk about the Green Bay game, but that looks like one of the slower games from last year. How do you think the impact of the new staff in Minnesota is that they're going to bump up their pace? I guess I'm worried a little bit if Green Bay gets up, do they just hammer Dillon and Jones run after run? Because I have a feeling when Sammy Watkins is looking to be your number one wide receiver, Sammy Watkins week 1, get him into your DFS lineups. But if he's your number one wide receiver, they're good. Aaron Jones is going to have a monster game, whether it's passing, rushing. I like pretty much the over on a lot of his props. Do you think that game's going to speed up a little bit?
Maybe a little bit. I'm worried about how the Vikings are going to move the ball against this Packers defense. It makes sense if there's a little bit of a learning curve for them getting used to the Kevin O'Connell offense. And I do like Irv Smith. We'll get to him a little bit, but that's more so just because of his price point. Rodgers being priced at $7K is a little bit egregious. And I feel like we don't really need to go up that high for him when, as we know, quarterback ownership tends to be pretty flat, at least relative to the other positions. So I think Rodgers in the passing game could have a big freaking performance while nobody really gets more than 6 or 7 targets. Like, that's the problem here. Like, yeah, Sammy Watkins should be the guy on one side, but what if he just rotates with Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson, and then the slot Randall Cobb and Amari Rodgers? Like, this really could be an offense potentially where no wide receiver without Allen Lazard is even running a route on, like 70% of the dropbacks. So could be a little bit problematic in terms of an overall target share perspective. So yeah, if anything, I think the running backs are probably the players to target in this matchup.
Yeah. Was it Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, and Devontae Adams that made Aaron Rodgers, or did Aaron Rodgers make them?
Oh, come on.
I guess we'll find out. All of the above, we'll say. They all helped everybody.
There we go. There we go.
Their peak years. All right. So I want to get to I'm circling back to my prize picks play here because I forgot it on the prop section. So I live in the fantasy world. So there's a bajillion different props you can get on prize picks, but I'm going straight to the fantasy score. I'm taking Debo over 14 fantasy points. He has hit this in every game of his career without George Kittle. Seems like a pretty reasonable bet to make. And pairing with that, I mentioned AJ Green. If you're looking for a reasonably priced DFS play with some upside, in last season in the games where he saw 6 or more targets, and Ian, would you expect him to get, if Rondale Moore doesn't play with how injured everybody else is on that roster, 6 targets seems like a reasonable amount to get for AJ Green, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay. So, well, if he gets 6 targets, he's at 8.5 fantasy points, Ian. He went over that in 9 of the 10 games last year. He got 6 targets. So that is a pairing I like. I think Kansas City, I don't know if I like I don't know. I think Kansas City is going to be able to handle this Arizona team. And I know you mentioned you were giving Kyler Murray a little bit of respect, but that might be a bet I make as we get off the show here, because I just think the Cardinals are a little too injured on defense. They're missing too much on offense now. And those garbage time points, they count for AJ Green. And 8.5, if he gets one good downfield target, it doesn't take much else for him to have a nice fantasy day. So that's my power play. AJ Green over 8.5, Debo over 14 fantasy points on Prize Picks. I nuked that, as we like to call it, in the prop betting channel. So that's a favorite of mine this week.
I like the Debo one. I'll give you that one.
All right. So I'll disagree with you on Seattle. You can disagree with me on AJ Green, and we'll come back and we'll fight it out on Sunday. We'll see.
It's pretty gross. It's pretty gross picks by both of us. I can admit that.
Hey, usually the best prop bets are the ones that feel pretty gross, honestly. All right, let's go to running back for DFS. There are a ton of running backs I want to play this week, Ian. The problem is they all cost a lot of money, and without the value we normally have, you've got Pierce, and I know you were talking Mike Davis, but I think Kenyon Drake's going to factor in a little bit on that Baltimore side. We don't have a known running back that is going to get those 20 plus touches that we can guarantee this week. So all the really high end guys are a little bit too expensive. If you had to pick Jonathan Taylor or Derrick Henry this week, if you're up towards the top, who would you get? I'm not finding either of those on my cash games. I can't find the salary for it. I wouldn't blame anyone for playing either of them. Do you have a preference between the two?
I'm fine with them both again in tournaments, but honestly, cash, I'm probably just going to get to CMC and then go down a little bit. Kamara is someone that I've been able to get to, and it's just one of those things where, like, why is Kamara probably $1,000 less than Derrick Henry? That doesn't make all that much sense to me. It could just be kind of a leftover effect of Alvin Kamara being ranked lower this year than normal, just because of the legal issues. Remember, these prices were released, quite a while ago, month or so, maybe 3 weeks. So maybe wasn't quite as sure when that happened. So Alvin Kamara does seem a little bit mispriced. Who's the third running back at? Yeah. And then Saquon is 6.1. I think that's the one guy we can really feel confident going down to and getting a bunch of touches. So I know he's still 6.1K, but who else are they going to give the ball to in New York at this point? It's not going to be Matt Breida, not going to be Gary Brightwell. Like Saquon Barkley, in terms of just pure dollars per touch, I think is probably the best price adjusted back on the slate.
Yeah, Saquon's got to have one of the highest chances of handling the most percentage of snaps for his team this week, right?
Yeah. So why not? And especially if people are going to be going up a little bit to Najee, I don't want anything to do with that in Cincinnati. Even who's the other one around that? Going down to Antonio Gibson. Like, I get it. The New York Giants offense isn't exactly scot-free of, just imploding as well. So it is kind of gross running backs there, but I'm far more confident in Saquon's just probably past game abilities, particularly over Gibson. And, we'll see exactly how much Trubisky even enables Najee this season with that.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you. I'm sort of in that CMC Kamara as my top tier. CMC, when healthy, is, he's a running back 1 and a wide receiver 1.5.
Yep.
Most weeks. So that looks pretty good if you can get to him. And if you can't, Kamara against Atlanta had 20 fantasy points, DraftKings points in both games against them last year. And why can't he do that again? I mean, he's going to be out there for the majority of touches, a very explosive player involved in the passing game. So I like him. I like Joe Mixon if you can't get to any of those against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh absolutely horrendous against the run last year. Nothing really changed, and Mixon diced them up in both games last year. And then I would be going down to that Barkley tier and really not trying. I don't really want to play Pierce or Gibson. I could play if I was forced to. I could see myself playing Gibson. I just don't think he's going to be involved very much in the passing game. He's more of the rusher in that one. So maybe on a FanDuel, but DraftKings, I'm a little bit concerned about him. But there's just so many running backs who are just going to get all the work in great spots. I think it's worth paying up for generally this week.
Yeah, Gibson, I don't think his roles are going to be that much different than like a Miles Sanders or Elijah Mitchell, who are just going to be like $400 cheaper. And I think probably with less ownership. So looking at the GPP mentioned before, I'd be curious how the ownership does shake out between Taylor, McCaffrey, and Henry, but I'm not afraid to just go with Henry and Taylor because either, what I was saying, maybe McCaffrey ends up being the chalky one, or to your point, just because there's not a single chalky one. Either way, that's going to leave them probably under owned. And then Miles Sanders is someone that I'm just really, getting behind at 5.4. Really just, I think everyone's going to be paying up a little bit more at running back. And I really think, man, we look up and we just see Miles Sanders with 20 plus touches. Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell might get, some targets and playing fast pass first situations. We're doing some assuming though about this Eagles passing game, really becoming the heart and soul of the offense. And maybe it is, but if everyone is on Jalen Hurts and also AJ Brown's getting a lot, all of a sudden going to Miles Sanders in the run game could give us a nice little leverage opportunity there. So it is funny though, just seeing guys like Sanders, Mitchell, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, these kind of like dead zone running backs that this time last week, looking at season-long leagues, it was like, oh, stay away from them. But then all of a sudden, you look at the week 1 matchups and they're set up pretty well. So I think Sanders and even Elijah Mitchell, getting off of their chalkier rushing quarterbacks could be a nice move.
I'm looking at James Conner as like a tournament play this week because I think you mentioned it towards the beginning of the show. Outside of Hollywood Brown and Zach Ertz, right? But if they somehow try to play the slow it down game, and there's Benjamin and a couple other guys back there to maybe steal a couple of plays, but I think to start the season, Conner looks to be the clear workhorse like he was towards the end of last season without Chase Edmonds there, in my opinion. So if you're looking for a lower owned running back, again, no one's going to get a ton of ownership this week. I think James Conner, if the Cardinals stay in that game, is going to be getting dual work the entire game there. 5, 6, 7 targets, 15 to 20 rush attempts if the game's close. Looks pretty juicy. It is at home. You don't have to worry about weather in that game. So he is someone I'm eyeing from the tournament perspective this week. Wide receivers, the chalk play of the week, pretty much the only one in my opinion, is going to be Michael Pittman on DraftKings at 5,500. Just looks to what is he, $700 or $800 mispriced on DraftKings. He looks like the player everyone's going to be playing for both cash games and tournaments. Outside of that, Ian, I mean, there are a lot of different ways to go. You're probably going to need a cheapie. So maybe I can throw that to you first on DraftKings. There's a couple of cheap plays. What are we looking at in terms of value at the wide receiver position? Because if we're spending up on quarterback, right, and we're in this mid to high tier of running backs, we have to save some salary. Who are a couple of those guys at the wide receiver position that might work?
Mentioned before, going in with the Hurts and AJ Brown stack. So definitely need to save some salary. I don't want to go all the way down to 3K. I know Wan'Dale Robinson is there, but Sterling Shepard is back. Like, it could be Galladay, Shepard, Tony, and 3 wide receiver sets. We don't know. So I'm just going to be kind of staying away from Wan'Dale for at least a week. Maybe if you want to throw him into a tournament, okay. But Romeo Doubs, same thing. I just, explained before why the Packers wide receivers could very well be rotating. So going up, I think that brings us pretty clearly to Jahan Dotson at 3.4K. I mean, throughout the preseason, saw him work alongside Terry McLaurin, Carson Wentz, and that first team offense all the time, even in 2 wide receiver sets. So he's already ahead of Curtis Samuel. And it's the same thing that happened in season long with Dawson, just getting disrespected compared to the other first round wide receivers, seemingly because people just thought he got overdrafted at 16th overall by the Washington Commanders. So to me, when they get overdrafted, that's a positive because that shows how much the team values them. But again, just to see Dotson going at 3,400 and Garrett Wilson, who's 4th on his own depth chart with Joe Flacco throwing the ball, costs 1,300 more or 1,300 more. So Jahan Dotson, I think, is a great chance to save some salary. There is another, who's the other guy down? Kadarius Toney at 4,100. Again, I'm just a little worried about the Giants' overall wide receiver pecking order. I'll feel better about it next week, but Toney would probably be the next cheapest guy that I'd feel really comfortable with. Otherwise, man, Michael Pittman, AJ Brown. Those are my current top 3. AJ Brown, Michael Pittman, Jahan Dotson filling up that cash lineup.
Yeah, and I want to note the Giants game is 4:25. Shepard today, they said we're taking it right up to game time.
Great.
So that unless we get a blurb from Schefter or somebody on Sunday morning, that can be a very, very difficult situation to read on. To me, it's literally 50-50 in my head as it stands right now, is if Sterling Shepard plays. If we get a blurb, people go to Tony, maybe to Robinson if Shepard's out. But just keep that in mind. Don't lock in any of those Giants. A very difficult situation, even to dice up on a Friday afternoon. A couple, I was just looking at maybe leverage spots, and normally I'm not doing the Millionaire Maker article this year. I have a new baby. I don't have time, Ian, to sit down at least and write these giant long articles that it took me, forever to write, at least for the Millionaire Maker ones. But what you want to do at the wide receiver position in these large field tournaments is get leverage, because generally, like 2/3 of the time, the high owned wide receivers bust. Except this week, there's no guy who's going to be like 25 or 30% owned. And those are the guys you generally want to get leverage off of. So if you're looking for a move off of Pittman, who I think is going to fit into a lot of people's rosters, there's a variety there, right? So we mentioned the Eagles, for the 15th time, I'm going to throw out Devontae Smith. You like A.J. Brown. People are going to play Dallas Goedert. Smith could certainly break a couple of big ones against Detroit. He could end up having some leverage against Michael Pittman. Adam Thielen, last I checked, he likes to score touchdowns. Those count as fantasy points as well. You get 6 of them for every touchdown.
Third most receiving touchdowns in the league over the past 2 seasons. Adam Thielen has more top 8 fantasy finishes than Justin Jefferson over the last 2 seasons. Madness, Brett. Madness.
Find yourself someone that looks at you like they do Adam Thielen in the red zone. And Brandon Ayuk, I mentioned Debo, but with Kittle out, and Ayuk had a nice connection with Trey Lance. There's been a lot of reports on that. Ayuk, these are all the pivots off of Pittman, basically in that price range. If you spend up, if you have two spendy wide receivers in your lineup, you're just going to be so different than everyone else.
Yeah.
In terms of just roster construction, I don't hate that. Do you have a couple favorite spend ups at the position?
I do like that point. I mean, because we have the value at wide receiver. We don't have the value at running back. So if you just want to just simple, pure lineup construction, getting unique, it does just make sense to flip-flop it, go get those expensive wide receivers, and maybe just swallow your pride and get the Mike Davises, Damian Pierces of the world up there in the lineup, Britt. There are a handful of, just mid-price guys I like, though. I mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown earlier, especially, next to T. Higgins, Hollywood Brown, Brandon Cook. So I think you're going to be catching more ownership. Talked about the Eagles Eagles' problems defending wide receivers out of the slot. I love his over on 5.5 receptions. Obviously, I love him at 6,100 as well. Also, Jalen Waddle at 6.4, pretty much the same reasons, man. Again, Higgins, Hollywood, Cooks, I think is going to be that, pretty much sweet spot for all the ownership. And Waddle, having been banged up, coming into this week and being limited in practice to start, everyone, liking Tyreek more. Yeah, I get it. But in a 1 week sample size, when Waddle's the one that's not getting nearly as much attention as Tyreek and some of the others, I do think that he's someone where we could look up, and similar to Amon-Ra, could just have, 7-8 catches and on full PPR. We'll take that 8 days of the week. Finally, George Pickens. It sounds like Deontay Johnson said he's going to play. So I think that could actually take people off of Pickens. So last year, when the Steelers played the Bengals had Chidobe Awuzie, the number 1 cornerback, shadow Deontay Johnson. That left Eli Apple to shadow Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool naturally had 2 pretty damn good games against the Bengals. Now Chase Claypool, though, is their full-time slot receiver. So, Britt, I'm pretty sure we're going to see Eli Apple tracking George Pickens all over the field. And I know it's Trubisky. I know a little bit about the weather, but man, 4.1K for someone that really isn't going to be all that highly owned, I think, because Kadarius Toney is right there at the exact same price point. The fact that Deontay Johnson is playing actually makes me even more happy to go after George Pickens.
All right, let's finish up the show with some tight end talk. With Zach Ertz returning to practice, if you're looking for a reasonably priced tight end, I mean, he's going to get peppered. He showed last year he was more than capable of just getting target after target from Kyler Murray. I think that makes some sense. You've got Big Irv, who's back after missing last season for the Vikings, and the Vikings have great corners. You can hurt them on the inside of the field with the tight end. So I like Irv Smith to have a reasonably good game. And it seemed like Travis Kelce 6,600. If there's a way to finagle him into your line, would you forego if instead of CMC you had to play Najee Harris to get Travis Kelce into your lineup, or DeAndre Swift, or
I don't
Antonio
hate
Gibson?
I don't hate it, man, because I looked at it, man. Last year, week 1 against the Browns, Travis Kelce was 8,300, and now he's 6,600. When we should probably have the target projection even higher for him without Tyreek. So that's gonna be a tough call, Britt. Damn it! Now, how am I gonna sleep this weekend now? After
if we had a running back that was 4,500, that was in someone got injured, everyone would be playing Travis Kelce this week. I still don't think he's going to be he's going to be the highest owned tight end, but it's not going to be like it would be if we just had a little bit more value.
And I mean, honestly, if you want to flex Travis Kelce and just treat him as a receiver, like this could be the week to do it. Because if you just look at him versus the other guys in that price range, I mean, Mike Williams is 6,600, Terry McLaurin 6,500. It's not an egregious week to do it as well, particularly at that price point. But yeah, I think in cash, if you're not going that route, Irv Smith at 3,400 just makes the most sense. In this new Kevin O'Connell offense with the Rams, like we saw Tyler Higbee last night have double-digit targets because the tight end doesn't leave the field under Sean McVay. So I really think that's what Irv Smith is setting up for. And other than getting really gross all the way down to the Stone Cold mid at 2,500 with Daniel Bellinger and Isaiah Likely, maybe throw them into a tournament if you're feeling daring. But otherwise, I just think Irv Smith gives us the highest combination of floor and ceiling there at 3,400. Other than Kelce, I would just say maybe David Njoku at 3,900. Like just looking under 4K to me, Irv Smith and Njoku. Maybe to a lesser extent, Hayden Hurst in terms of my confidence level. Those are the 3 guys that I'm really confident are going to be out there for a heavy majority of the routes and snaps and might not be in terrible offenses. Can't quite say the same for Njoku, though.
All right, I got a couple turn plays. If you're touchdown hunting, why not take a team in a dome that's a big favorite? It's not a home favorite, so big home favorites are one of the biggest trends you can get for tight ends. But Mo Alley Cox, there's literally like no one else to play that I think is capable of playing tight end currently at the NFL level for the Indianapolis Colts. I expect him to be a near every down player for Indianapolis this week against Houston. I believe what's the former basketball player turned professional tight end.
He's the biggest player. He's the biggest person in the NFL. Like, I don't care what the height weight says. You see Mo Alley Cox on the field and everyone looks small. They're going to have him and Jelani Woods, who I agree with you. Like, he's not NFL ready, but we're going to get I think we already have one. It was Matt Ryan, who's like, 6'4", 6'5", like 220. Matt Ryan standing next to Mo Alley Cox and Jelani Woods look like a child, man. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I like Mo Alley Cox if you're just touchdown hunting. Let's see, what else do I got? Oh, and Mark Andrews. If you're playing Lamar Jackson, I sort of like him in the non-Lamar. I like him with Lamar, but I also like him in a non-Lamar lineup because Kelsey's going to be 15 or 20% on. You're getting half of that on Mark Andrews, and who else is going to catch the ball? I mean, it's Rashad Bateman, it's Mark Andrews. That's the offense this year. It's going to be a lot of running the football. It's going to be those two on play action, and Andrews had a big season last year. Some of it was when Lamar Jackson was out because he got absolutely peppered with targets. But if you were looking for, an ownership swerve off of Kelsey, it's definitely Mark Andrews, in my opinion. Let's see. I think that's about it. I got anyone else at tight end you want to talk about?
Nah, I'm good. Do you have any thoughts on defense? I think the Bears at 2,200 at home. Like, yeah, I know the 49ers 6.5 point favorites, but expected Trey Lance to just be mistake-free early on, the way he could potentially be running around. When we see these mobile quarterbacks taking a lot of sacks, that's ultimately what we're looking for. And even though the Bears lost Khalil Mack, they still do have some talent there, with Robert Quinn, Roquan Smith in that front seven, Eddie Jackson holding it down in the back end. So I think the Bears at 2,200 is about as cheap as I'd be willing to go. Washington at home against the Jaguars at 2,500 is reasonable.
That's a chalk for sure, Andre.
Yeah, I don't see much reason to pay up for defense this week when we have those options.
Yeah, you can convince me. I like the Bears from Trey Lance isn't going to be ultra owned, but to get even cheaper, to get a couple more dollars. You can convince me to play the Dolphins at home against New England too. I think the Dolphins win that game.
Especially relatively hearing Patriot, like what was the report this morning? Patriots considering scrapping their new scheme.
Ridiculous.
Like,
what do you expect when you have a defensive coordinator running your offense? Sometimes, it just doesn't make any sense. Well, how does Bill Belichick allow things like this to happen? There's something going on there.
I'm just looking forward to every mistake that Mac Jones makes, even if it's 100% on him, just blaming it on Matt Patricia. That's going to be a fun bit throughout the year.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. All right, I think that's going to wrap it up for week one. Ian, I am very pleased to be running this back another year with you.
Likewise.
And tune into this show and every other show here on RotoGrinders throughout the season on the podcast feed on YouTube. Check out Scores and Odds, our sports betting app here at RotoGrinders. Have yourself some fun this Sunday, whether it's DFS, whether it's sports books, whether it's whatever it is. I mean, anyone listening to this, Ian, they're watching football on Sunday. So, and they're having some money down on it one way or another. So enjoy your weekend. Ian, let the people know. There's people new all the time to the RotoGrinders feed. We got a lot of subscribers. Let them know where to find you and anything else you might be doing this season.
PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Got plenty of written stuff on PFF.com as well. You guys saw the Mismatch Manifesto. Also have quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end breakdowns. I've been trying to not type 8,000 words per article this time around. Maybe actually
writing is for the dogs, man.
Maybe just not have my family hate me quite as much. So what I've tried to do is, instead of just going through each and every team, running, the same important studies and the same stats I want, but just focusing more on, the outliers at the top and bottom of it. So if you go check out the articles, again, a lot of different sections. I'm not just giving you 60 block paragraphs after another. Got my rankings in there, some cool charts, cool information. Fantasy betting, or just trying to sound a little bit smarter in front of your friends. I think I got a lot there for you. And Britt, we'll be back here every Tuesday throughout the season, man. Let's make it a great one.
Every Friday throughout the season.
Oh, did I say Tuesday? My goodness. 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock every Friday. There we go.
Fridays, 2 o'clock. We'll be here live, except if and when I take my many of Disney vacations, as the wife makes me do throughout the Christmas time. All right, guys. Appreciate everyone listening, watching, downloading this show and every show here on RotoGrinders. For Ian, I'm Britt. Thanks for tuning in for week one. Tune in next week. We out you.